Welcome to another Orchestry webinar. This time for everyone's favorite feature, David, permissions, SharePoint
Permissions and
permissions.
sharing. Yeah.
Permissions and sharing, everyone's favorite topic, which we're going to cover all through today, because there's a lot to this. As soon as we started looking further down into this, it is really a minefield of, I don't know what you would say, Dave, mistakes, hilarity, pain, infamous, I would say as well.
Horror, at times horror. Yeah.
Or at times horror as well. Yeah. So
Yeah.
lots and lots of stuff to get through. So why don't we get started? Now, before we begin, we have a battle of the GPTs here, and we have a poll as well. So because our graphic designer was on holidays, we had to create an image for this particular webinar. So we used ChatGPT and we used Copilot to create two different images, both with the same prompt. So let's see which one the crowd likes the best before we get started. So Dave, let's look at option one
so
here.
let's go option one, and then we'll have a poll once you've seen both options.
This is option one, and it's the same prompt. It's the anime style because everyone does that. This is obviously not the Orchestry logo, by the way, folks, but it's a good effort. So this is option one, and let's see option two. Option two, a little bit different.
Okay. Should we go back to option one again? Have another check?
Option one. Yeah.
Okay. Option one, and then option two. Let's launch the poll here.
Let's launch the poll and see which one people like better. Don't worry, folks. This is going to be really, really quick, just to get you into the mood to chat here. Which option do you think was created by which tool? Which one? Who thinks that option one is through ChatGPT?
Good question.
And feel free to put your things within the chat here as well. And
so what were the two tools? ChatGPT and?
ChatGPT and Copilot for Microsoft 365, the image thing, basically, that we have. All right. I think we've got a thing here. 77%. Go for option one.
Wow.
What do we think option one was created with?
Let's go back to option one here. We've got no one willing to weigh in.
No one willing to weigh in. So option one was created with ChatGPT. Tony Graves, you are a winner. Yeah, ChatGPT. It's a little bit of a better job. I thought that was interesting because we use both tools all of the time, and I think we're always interested, Dave, to understand the nuances and the differences. Exact same prompt, by the way, folks, as well. All right. Let's get rocking. Now,
let's get started.
The fun's over. Now it's time to talk about permissions. So let's get started. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Some introductions first. My name is Michael Basarik. I'm one of the founders and the CEO here at Orchestry. Lots of experience in Microsoft 365. Super grateful for everyone that is here today. And again, if you haven't been to one of our webinars, lots of information, lots of learnings. We try to keep them fairly light and fairly interactive as well. God only knows SharePoint permissions needs a little bit of levity, I would say, Dave, during the conversation.
That's a good word for it. Yeah.
Levity is the word. But yeah, lots of experience in M365 again. If you have any questions before or after, or preferably during the webinar, feel free to get in touch. And David, hello.
Hello. Yeah, I'm a longtime colleague of Michael's here. I always love doing these webinars with him. We have the rapport down pat now after many years of doing this. But I'm the director of product here at Orchestry, but been in this space for a while, and sharing has been, in some ways, I think, Michael, when you're consulting, it's actually a bit of an asset because it is so confusing. It becomes kind of like a limitless source of service and expertise you can offer, right? Because no one really truly understands what's going on here.
I know, a limited source of opportunity for Microsoft partners, and I would say unlimited pain for customers.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Yeah, and who are we? Well, if you haven't heard of Orchestry, we're an M365 management tool. We will keep it very light today, and if you're interested to learn more at the end, we'll have a little poll, and we'd be happy to reach out to you. But very, very quickly, we cover things like guest management, lifecycle management, reporting, provisioning, and of course, sharing. So we'll talk today about sharing, permissions, and broken inheritance, all of which are things that are available in our tool.
Just available though, very, very new, which is one of the reasons as well.
And I think I speak for Michael here and anybody I do webinars with, the more engagement we have in the chat, the better. I think this is something that we always find that makes for the webinar more interesting. So please leave any questions, comments, any concerns, remarks even in the chat here, and we'd love to hear from you and kind of weave in your very specific questions into the topic we discussed today.
Yes. And let us know where you're joining from as well here. South Texas. Nice.
Yeah, nice. Okay, cool. So if you want to get in touch with us, we are very present on LinkedIn and on X, both Michael and I as well. So feel free to add us. We'd love to chat with you. Quebec. Some people from Quebec as well. Excellent. All right, so today's agenda, let's jump in. We have a lot of content we want to share, and we want to allow some time for questions. So welcome everyone, wherever you're coming from. What we're going to talk about here in the order on the screen here, we're going to go through a bit of a deep dive into permissions, links. We're going to talk about broken inheritance, how these things all work and kind of collide with one another, and what are some of the challenges that we often see. Through this, we have a lot of visuals. If you're a visual person, hopefully you will appreciate these. Will help to kind of illustrate how big of a problem this can become. We'll talk a little bit about what Microsoft gives you. Um, oh, Kitao is here. Welcome. What Microsoft tools are available to you and how they do have some limitations, and then how can Orchestry help? It will leave maybe just a few minutes at the end, but the focus really is kind of on the education and showing some light here on what this topic is really about. So,
And just before David begins, again, lots of chat. Make sure you ask questions because there's going to be a bunch of these. I don't think we're going to be able to answer all of them, but we'll give it a good shot here. And again, we do assume, I would say, Dave, that you have some sort of idea around what SharePoint is and maybe generally understand the high level permission stuff. There's gonna be some high level stuff, but we're also gonna go pretty deep into some of these areas because it gets really fascinating really quickly in terms of how we do all of these things.
right.
So let's take it away.
All right, so let's jump in with some of the basics here. So we're going to talk about SharePoint permissions, and those of you who've been in the SharePoint space for a while know how things have kind of grown, evolved organically over time, but a lot of the underlying feature sets are still very much the same. One of the things that is a little bit newer with M365 in the cloud is, not recently, but was the introduction of this new container of the Microsoft 365 group, right? And I think that even at this layer, this introduces confusion for a lot of people because we have multiple containers where we can manage permissions. We can do them on the group, we can do them in the team, we can do them in SharePoint sites. It's not always very clear what the relationship is between these and what the best practices are, right? So when we look at how they relate to each other, we've got a few visuals here. Now, when we look at group connected objects, it's an obvious place to start, right? Because Microsoft is most often pushing that they want you to manage things via an M365 group. Most commonly, you see this with a team, right? With a team, there's always a group attached. And we also know that with the team, we always have an underlying SharePoint site behind the scenes, right? But that group is wrapped around both of these, right? Now we also have the option where you can create a group connected SharePoint site, like a SharePoint team site without a team. And that will also have a group, right? In this case, but it might not have a team now. In the future, you could add one, but regardless, you have both of these scenarios here, scenario 1 and scenario 2, which both involve this M365 group. But exacerbating complexity is the fact that SharePoint sites can also exist without groups, right? We can call them standalone sites or whatever you want to call them, but like a communication site in SharePoint has no group, so the permissions can never be managed in the group. They're always going to be managed in the site. And of course, with legacy sites like SharePoint Classic sites, the story there is the same as well, right? So we have group connected objects, we have non-group connected objects, and even with group connected objects, we have already a little bit of misalignment. There is an inheritance model that if you manage members in your group, for example, let's say you have a team, right? Michael has a team and he's managing a project. He's the project manager. And what he's doing is he's following best practices and he's managing the owners and the members for that team at the group level. Great. He's doing the right thing. And what automatically happens is that anyone in the owners group will get inherited into the owners for the attached SharePoint site. and all the members will get automatically inherited into the members for the SharePoint site as well. But you can see already there's something here that's different. SharePoint has always had this reader or visitor role, right? And the group level does not introduce that concept. So already, even if you're doing everything perfectly, you already have a potential for misalignment here, Michael, because you have visitors in the site that don't exist in the group.
And do you know why there's no visitors security role for the group?
Tell us.
I don't know either. I'm
Oh,
asking you.
no, I was
No,
really
I have
excited.
no idea. I mean, it's interesting because it would have been much easier to do a visitor at the group level. I think
Right.
the reason probably isn't is that concept of like a visitor to a team that only has read-only access to the team and maybe can view the
Weird.
chats, but they can't respond
Yeah,
to them. Probably there was just way too much complexity. But as
right.
Dave mentioned, already you have this misalignment, which gets strange
Right.
very, very quickly.
And like I said, I mean, in an ideal world, you have alignment, right? You have balance in the force here, and you have alignment between the members in the groups and the members and owners in the site. And you might have something that looks like this. This is a happy place for us, right? Where the people in the group, the owners there are fully aligned with the owners in the SharePoint site. Same is true of the members. This should say members and not users here. Across the two should be the same, right? And maybe we have no visitors, so there's no problem here. But what often happens is, and this is something we see with a lot of our customers, we're very fortunate to be able to see patterns across many hundreds of customers, is situations occur like this very easily. Microsoft has actually made it very easy with this share site only button, Michael, that we love
Yeah.
to hate, right? And by adding people to your SharePoint site only, what you have is you end up having a big delta of additional people that have access to the site that you don't have visibility to in the group. So, you've been told and you're trying your best to manage permissions at the group, but at the end of the day, you can't do it just there because you need to manage both the site and the group, and you need to make sure that if they're not aligned, that it's intentional, right? Very
Yeah.
hard.
And it's never aligned. I think Sam just mentioned here. We see this all of the time, and it's really
Yeah.
difficult as an owner of, let's say, a group. It could be a team or it could be a SharePoint site, just to try to understand who the hell has access to what. And
Right.
again, it's this really strange model that Microsoft introduces, which kind of we talk about it in terms of like overexposure of the SharePoint site, or like the blast radius just increases and can
Right.
increase exponentially because lots of organizations do this. And there's a number of business reasons, Dave, we hear about it.
Yeah.
Some of the times, hey, we just want to give people access to the content. We don't want to
Yeah.
give them access to the conversations or the teams, for instance. We want to give them a read-only view. But straight away, this again becomes a huge challenge for companies.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Even if it's intentional, you really don't have great tooling to manage this. If it's unintentional, you have a problem, right? Because as I often talk with people, at the end of the day, I mean, you could have sensitive conversations in the team, but I usually hear from people that the most sensitive things in the group are usually the documents in the SharePoint site, right,
Yeah,
Michael? Like that's typically the rule of thumb, right? So if they have access here, ultimately that's a problem, right? Because that's where potentially the most confidential content lives. So how are you supposed to manage this, right? Because out of the box, you have with SharePoint, you have now ways to go look at the group membership, which you can open here. And you can also open the site permissions here. And I guess what you could do is do like I've done here and take a screenshot of them and put them side by side. But even putting them side by side is very difficult to make sense of, right? Because all of the group people are going to be inherited into the groups that are sitting on the SharePoint site. The people will not be listed out flat, there's good reasons for that. But looking at this, you have to really know already here, you already have to really know SharePoint permissions at a fairly, I would say, not even like a basic level, but a moderate level of understanding here, Michael, to even make sense of this.
yeah. And often what we also see as well is extra hilarity where someone might be an owner of the group and then someone accidentally removes them from the site permission as well, right? So
Right.
all of these things are possible as well. But as Dave mentioned, just trying to understand this out of the box is very, very difficult and close to impossible. And we hear this from administrators all of the time, that they're constantly going in, clicking, trying to understand what the hell's going on. And it's difficult at best.
Right. So I think, that's where things are for just at the group level. We haven't even talked about sharing links and broken inheritance yet, right? This is like the simplest level of the story, right? So let's go into the stuff that gets really hairy here, right? We'll start with sharing links, and then we will also talk about that in relation to broken inheritance and show you a whole bunch of examples of things that we've personally seen happen. So sharing links. What are sharing links? Sharing links are, among the newer pieces of functionality, right? Back in the on-prem days, sharing links was very different, right? You could share an absolute link to an object, but it only worked if people had access. This idea now of being able to create links that is now available in SharePoint Online is a very different concept, right? When you are creating links here, you're actually creating a link object that lives on its own, separate from the item, right? So these work in a different way than they did back in early SharePoint days, right? These actually provide a direct pathway into the content. So if I have an executive salaries Excel, I click copy link, and I'm not paying attention, and that default happens to be in any one link, I've created a direct access to that salary document, and anyone in the world that gets access to that link can bypass any security you have essentially and get into it. There's some exceptions here, right? You could have DLP and other things, Michael, but generally speaking, right, we're talking about a very highly exposed link, very dangerous possible outcome there, right?
Yeah.
So what does this look like when we look at things kind of more from an architectural level? Let's look at a couple diagrams here where I'm going to talk about, here's the site, here's the library, here's a folder in a library, and here's some documents that live in that folder. This is not uncommon, right? This is a very common practice, right? Of site, library, folder. Often we have many folders deep, and we have documents kind of peppered throughout that structure, right? So if we look at that executive salary document again, it's not even just a matter of one link can be created to it. You can create multiple links, right? You can create multiple types of links to the same file, right? You could have an everyone link out there. Someone comes along later and creates an organizational link. Then a third person comes in and creates a specific user's link, right? This is chaos because you have multiple pathways in, and very difficult, as you'll see in a second, to really monitor this and manage this. So what you end up having is this potential horror where you hear from your CIO or CSO, someone got their hands on the executive salaries document. What the hell happened?
Yeah, and
Right?
we've seen this at a couple of customers. I think the best example was organization was using anyone links. Someone internal for the organization copied a bunch of anyone links and sent it to their Gmail because they wanted access to it. Their Gmail got hacked, and all of a sudden you've got someone who's got a Gmail account got automatically access into these SharePoint sites from there. So
Right.
it's one of the reasons that, again, Microsoft is pretty strongly, I think, recommending against using these anyone links.
Yeah.
But again, these sharing links are so easy to create, and really behind the scenes, it's doing a whole bunch of stuff with permissions and breaking permissions, which we'll talk about. But again, if you're not careful, there's a whole bunch of issues with this, and it's really one of the reasons that Microsoft has really started talking about oversharing, right?
Oversharing.
Oversharing. And the main reason for oversharing is these sharing links. It's one of the reasons they've put in all of this functionality around this as well. The best thing for anyone links, I think someone mentioned this, is you just turn off the anyone links. I think most organizations are doing this now, but we'll show you some horror stories because there's a lot of those as well. Glenn says, worked with an org where a single user had created 2,500 org links for a single site. Glenn, we got a customer who's got 280,000 sharing links within a single site. It's just nuts, right? It's just nuts. When people don't really know what they're doing, they create a lot of these, and without training as well. And because the defaults are dumb, right, Dave?
Yeah.
Let's be honest. The defaults are stupid as well from Microsoft.
Yeah.
If the default is anyone, people just use anyone, right? And again, even if it's organizational, it gets a little bit more difficult. Right.
Yeah,
And
and
let's talk about
like
sharing links.
like Greg said, I mean, turning off anyone links is good, but organizational links, as other people have said, are also very potentially problematic. Oversharing can occur with organizational links because it's a link that anyone in your entire company can open, right? There's not a ton of content that usually should be opened by
Yeah.
everyone other than like intranet content and stuff like that, right? Which should be public anyway. So once you create link or links, they provide what I like to describe as kind of this durable pathway to the content. These come in three flavors: the anyone link, the organizational link, and the specific users link. Of these three, it's pretty easy to argue that the safest is the specific users link, right? Because you're designating specific people, you're actually thinking about it. You might be asking yourself, what about the other link? There's this existing access link. That behaves in the old fashion. It doesn't really fit in with these three where a new link object is created. This simply grabs the link to the object, and only people that already have access to the site or the group will have access to the content. This, in our opinion, actually makes for the safest link. And the one of the hilarious things about the link defaults that, going back to what Michael just said, is that you cannot even make this link your default link in the UI in SharePoint Online, but you can with PowerShell. So it's very strange, right? Because the link that would make the most sense to be the default, I would say for almost all customers, is actually not easy to set, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Another
it's not the
thing,
default either.
right? No, it's not the default, and you can't even set it that way in the GUI, right? It's really quite ironic to me. The other thing with links is that links, we see a lot of links being created to files, but you can create links to entire lists and folders. The problem with that is that that folder link can become a bit of a black box, as you'll see in some examples here. They're a bit tongue in cheek, but these are things we've actually seen happen, right? So let's go through a couple demos here. The first one here is literally just exemplifying how easy it is for a user to copy, in this case, an organizational link because that's the default. There's nothing nefarious going on here. The user just clicked the button copy link and an org link was auto-generated for them, right? They weren't prompted really for what kind of link do you want. It's just going to create the default. So this spirals out of control really quickly, right? Because people are all just trying to get their work done. They're trying to move through their task and move on. And in here, it's Michael asked me for a link to this document. I'm going to get in and get out as fast as I can. Well, the problem is, unless you're like hyper vigilant, you're not going to notice this, right? And this creates, in this case, a potential for a link that's way overexposed beyond what it should be. Let's see another example here. This is where we're showing this dreaded example of an anyone link being copied here. And in this case, again, you can imagine this scenario. Boss asked for a link. So let's go and email this link over to him as quickly as possible, send it over. But now I'm going to flip over to the recipient of that email. And what are they going to do? Well, they're going to do something that, again, they could easily do without thinking. They're actually just going to forward this email to someone else, right? The link isn't anyone link. So the more it gets shared out, this could even fall into a Reddit if you weren't careful, right? And anyone can open it, right? There's no security check. There's not even any auditing of people that use the anyone link, which is particularly scary for security people, right? Because you cannot even check to see who's actually accessed it through the anyone link mechanism. So very scary stuff. Now, if we move on a little bit to how this actually impacts permissions, this is where the onion starts to unravel a little bit. And we're going to take you kind of behind the curtain and show you how things actually work. So what actually happens to the content and permissions in SharePoint when you create links? It actually has a lot of nuance to it. It's not even as simple as once you create a link, this happens. Actually, in many cases, what matters is not when the link is created, but actually when someone opens the link, actions happen, right? So here's a couple examples of that and some of the implications of that. So here is, I believe it was an organizational link. Yes, here I have an organizational link. We can tell by the briefcase here that I've created. And at this stage, no one has actually used the link. You'll notice here my SharePoint permissions look pristine. But you know what then later happened is Reina opened that link, and all of a sudden now you see the permissions have changed, Reina is now listed down here. So there is definitely an impact between not only the creation of the links, but also the interaction with those links, which you can't really control, which will have a direct impact on the permissions behind the scenes, right? And you might say, who cares? I don't care. Like, what does it matter to me if when the link is claimed, Reina can access it? Well, it actually has a very direct impact on things like search and Copilot. So here's a very clear example of that. Look at the scenario I have here with Copilot. Before I click the link, I specifically asked for a budget number associated with Project Gemini, which is just a made-up project, right? And if you look here, you can see that Copilot says, can't help you, can't find anything. The only thing that has happened in between my first prompt and the second prompt is that I've clicked the link. That's all. So it does actually really matter. Look at what happened here in the second prompt. Because that user has now been explicitly added in SharePoint behind the scenes, that means that that content is now visible and indexed and part of the security trimmed content that Copilot will return to them.
And it's
So
fascinating because no one knows this. And it's
yeah,
really interesting from a Copilot perspective, because what happens is Dave shares that link out to me, right? I never click on it. I go into Copilot or search and I search for it because Dave has shared it with me.
right.
Right? It's
Should be
shared.
there.
It's there, right? And I go in and then I frantically try to find this piece of content. Now, I don't know. It'll be interesting maybe in the comments here what people see. I don't know how many IT service desk tickets we hear from customers around this, but it's some insane number where, again, what happens is that you don't get access to that piece of content just because you have the link. You have to go and click on the link first. Now, I don't know if anyone remembers 18 months ago or 2 years ago when Copilot was launched, Dave. I don't know if you remember this. When it was launched originally, remember the functionality wasn't like this for anyone links. Remember what Copilot did, I think it was only for the first maybe couple of months in private preview, is that if you had anyone links, Copilot assumed that it's an anyone link, anyone should have access to this.
Right.
Microsoft really quickly killed that because they found the carnage that was anyone links, and probably the same thing with these organizational links here as well. But this is where it's something that's really subtle. I mean, I'm not sure if people knew this or not, but it can really trip people up because, again, it's not just the process of creating the link, it's the process of getting access to it. And then, as Dave mentioned, in the back end, there's broken permissions happening. These people get added. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on here to make this work.
The thing to me that's really the most fascinating is like even if I issued the link, I really have no way to know which of these two results the people that I'm sending it to are going to get. I can't even predict it, right? And that's a big problem for me. I can't predict what the experience will be, and I'm the one sharing it. That's strange, right? You typically, as someone executing a share, you should be able to reliably predict what someone is going to get and see, right? And in this case, you can't, right? It's actually really strange.
Yeah, and it doesn't work like that from what I understand in other tools. Google doesn't work like this. Google, if you issue the link, people have the link, they get access to the content. This is this kind of strange nuance that Microsoft 365 has as well.
And so this, just for clarity, it's easy to forget. This applies only to the anyone link and the org links. This idea of the claiming it having an impact with specific users, they get added right away. So that's another good reason to use the specific users link is you can predict and you can also kind of make sure that you have a direct impact on the experience.
Yeah, and it's also why this topic gets complicated like hell. So a couple of things here, Dave. Good questions, good comments from Adrian Rich. So was the recommendation to turn off anyone links?
Well, we usually recommend that customers at the tenant level turn it off and then only turn it on a site by exception basis, right, Michael? Because there are some sites, it's really hard for some customers to say that they can't ever have anyone links. There's some use cases where really it's the only solution, right? But having it by default turned on for everyone is a very, very bad idea, right? You really want to make sure there's some kind of vetting process and that there's clear knowledge being shared around what's going to happen when that's turned on.
Yeah, I would, Adrian, say from what we see with most of our customers, just looking at some of the data we're getting back, the vast majority have anyone switched off.
Yeah,
Otherwise, everyone just uses the anyone link, right? Because
right,
why would you go through all of the additional steps, right, to click on that
right,
stuff? I mean, one of the things we don't cover here, which maybe we should have, Dave, is like how many different ways there are to share stuff, like through the UI. It's
right,
insane. There's like
right,
10 different ways, right, to essentially do that, which even gets more confusing through here as well. But yeah,
right.
Adrian, I would say vast majority of our customers definitely turning off anyone links. If you do want to make something a little bit more open, you can do that on a site by site basis. Either you have to go and provision them or use a tool like Orchestry. Maybe we can help you with that, or have to go into the back end of M365 and change those pieces also. But we do see this a lot on the OneDrive side in particular, that OneDrive is a little bit less permissive. So there's a lot of anyone links on the OneDrive piece there as well.
Let's talk about another potential problem here, which I think is again fascinating, easy to understand, but we have a very good, simple example here with a video of what happens when you share from a folder, right? And this is it's one of my favorites, I think, just because of the impact can be so large, right? So here's a very straightforward example, right? Individuals coming in has created or has access to a sensitive information folder, they're going to drag in something that's sensitive, right? It's a single document right now. That whole folder is only made up of a single piece of content. So they can confidently go ahead and say they're going to share this with the organization because they know what's in the folder right now. The problem is they cannot predict or control what's going to be dropped into that folder in the future, right? So what happens if this poor old sap Dave here comes in and he sees this folder? He doesn't know there's a sharing link to it. I'm just happens to drop in 33 files here, just a big bulk dump of files into the sensitive information folder. Little did he know there was already a sharing link out there for this whole folder, regardless of what content changes happen now or in the future. So that's to me a huge problem. It's a big black box, right? Whenever you share a folder, because how can you predict, again, how can you predict what users will see if you can't control what content gets dropped in there in the future? So very risky as well, I would argue, the folder sharing, especially because the call out from Microsoft is literally just this small icon. And that's supposed to be enough to tell you that this might be shared with people. But let's face it, most people are not going to notice this, or are they going to know what it is? So we talked about some of the nuances of sharing links and some of the pitfalls, some of the challenges, how making it as easy as they have in SharePoint to share things is great in some regards, also creates a mess for you in the back end. And trust me when I say we've only scratched the surface here of this onion. We're going to go in another layer deeper here with the broken inheritance story. So if you're a SharePoint person, you'll know about broken inheritance. It's existed for a long time. But do you know the nuances of how the broken inheritance relates to sharing? A lot of people don't, actually. It's really interesting. So if we look at broken inheritance, what is it? First of all, well, it's we call it broken because typically in SharePoint, we want the permission model to flow down our tree structure, right? So let's say we have a site at the top, we have a library, then we have a folder, and then we have an item. We have this nice clean tree-like hierarchy, and we want the permissions to flow from the top down to the bottom, right? That's that kind of typical inheritance model. With broken inheritance, we're making a break there. That's also known as unique permissions in the SharePoint world. So this is where that flow or that inheritance model has been deliberately or accidentally interrupted. And when you do that, the items below that break are no longer going to respect the permissions necessarily that you've set up above. So imagine an owner trying to manage content in their site and trying to understand that they're managing people at the site level. They have a very clear idea of who has access, but they're constantly getting messages from people saying, I don't have access to this. I don't have access to this. They're scratching their head and they're saying, this makes no sense because I've given them access to the whole site. Well, broken inheritance is usually the answer. I have someone on the call here where I remember remember back when I was doing help desk in the SharePoint world, we would get tickets like this all the time, right? Can't have access to this. What's going on? Broken inheritance was usually the reason behind it. So let's look at a visual again to make this make a little bit more sense. So again, we have our hierarchy here. We have our site, we have our library. Below the library, we have a folder. And within this folder here, we have, again, a very simple example where we have 4 documents. So in a normal world, the inheritance works that the library would inherit up, or inherit down, I should say, the permissions that are set at the site level. But once they're broken, as we've done here, permission changes that are done here will not necessarily continue to trickle down any further anytime in the future. So what happens is additional people were added here to this folder. That will automatically break the inheritance. It's going to do it for you. It's not even going to ask you. It's just going to do it. That's the hard part about this, right? And not only that, when I create a sharing link, it's going to automatically break the inheritance for me as well. So if I create a specific user link here and I send it to Michael, that's automatically going to break the inheritance in the backend, in the permission model, and it's going to start to add additional people that now have access to this folder only, not up above, and the link now between this and this above it is now broken unless you restore it manually. So this is a huge problem, right? Because every time you have someone sharing links, they're breaking inheritance, which means that on a site, it is not uncommon to have 50,000 instances of broken inheritance in a site or more, right? And then imagine supporting that. Imagine trying to give visibility to people about who has access to what on your site. If your site has 100,000 items, 50,000 items are broken, it's going to be impossible for you to really realistically wrap your head around who is the kind of the full audience that has access to this site. So broken inheritance is kind of this last layer that gets impacted by sharing links. It gets impacted by automations. It also, for those who know it well, people have been breaking inheritance in SharePoint since SharePoint 2003, probably, or even before, right? It can be done manually as well. So there's many ways this can happen, but it's greatly exacerbated by the sharing links functionality, which will auto break inheritance in the backend, causing a nightmare spider web of permissions that is going to be very hard to manage. So let's talk now about bringing this all together. What are some of the best practices? And then once we do this, I'll flip it over to Michael and we'll talk about what are some of the ways that you would monitor this in SharePoint out of the box. So first of all, what are the impacts? Who cares, right? Why does this matter to me? Well, as we've shown, it can have a very direct impact on Copilot, both in terms of leaking information into answers that you weren't expecting, or if people think that they have access to content, like in the example Michael gave, but in fact, they haven't clicked the link and therefore Copilot doesn't see it, they may find that the answer quality that they get from Copilot is very poor, right? And this is one of the big things we've heard from our customers, Michael, with Copilot adoption is the answers are terrible.
Yeah, right? Or I have a document, why isn't it coming up in Copilot when I've been given access for it? Right? That's the thing we hear all the time. And it's a very strange thing to tell users, well, you have to go click this link to get access to it. right? Before you can find it. So that's the other thing. The other thing is, as Dave mentioned, is around security. I mean, I think everyone knows around this. Just no one has any confidence about who the hell has access to what. I mean, we see this all of the time. Maybe this wasn't such a huge issue before Copilot, but I think Copilot is so good at finding content that you have access to, you might not know that you have access to, that this has really become an issue and why oversharing is, apart from Copilot, I think, oversharing is probably one of the other words. Well, agents is probably number 2 on the list at the moment, but oversharing will be close to number 3. And again, it's that issue that oversharing is such a huge challenge because in Copilot you get access to this content, particularly for Gen AI, that might not be might not be correct. The other thing is governance. It's just really complicated, right? And people just want to do the easiest thing, as you've mentioned, Dave. So controlling people breaking permissions is just next to impossible, right? People go in, you can change these things. If you don't really have any idea what you're doing, you can reasonably really cause some issues. We see this all of the time, Dave, where someone goes in and breaks breaks permissions at a document, like at the documents folder level, right? So you've got that ability as well. And then, of course, the adoption thing as well, the breaks trust in the pool. Real quick question, Dave, from Tony, can Copilot be prompted to ignore all shared links? No, there's no way that you can do that. I don't even think, no, I would say no. I've never heard of a way. You could prompt it, but I really, really doubt it, essentially. Yeah.
Let's talk about a very technical slide here just for a second, because I did a bit of a deep dive into this and I found this fascinating around limits. We actually have customers that have told us that they've run into some of the hard limits around sharing, where they have a site that has so many sharing links, Michael, that they now get an error anytime they try to share anything else.
If you're running into these limits, you have massive problems. Just to be really blunt, if you really are running into these limits, this is a terrible thing, and you need to start reorganizing your content. Particularly, Dave, we've seen a lot of customers do migrations where they slam in the shared drive into a single SharePoint site across all of these folders, and then just start hammering through breaking down permissions. This is where you typically get into a lot of these sharing limits.
Yeah, biggest culprit for sure is the lift and shift model from another system, no organization. Basically, behind the scenes, every time you break inheritance, you have what's called an ACL, which is essentially a list of the people that have access to that. And you can have up to 50,000 of these per list or library, but Microsoft is very explicit in saying if you go over 5,000, you will see performance degradation in your tenant. That's not a lot, really, right? When you think about it, in some of the scale of sizes of libraries we've seen, Michael, with terabytes of data, this can happen.
Yeah. But Dave says an interesting thing here, like, if you share 10,000 files independently, it'll create or cost you 10,000 ACLs. But if you create a folder and then populate it, it only costs you one. So again, there is some nuance here.
There is
nuance here as well.
But remediating this is virtually impossible, because if you are hitting this limit already, the only way to purge these ACLs is to restore inheritance on items, and you might have to do that on 10,000 independent items, one at a time. So that, from a remediation perspective, is really, really challenging to really resolve. All right, let's talk about some best practices. Some of them people have already been kind enough to share in the chat here, and this is kind of our summary of the heavy hitters. Obviously, we try to follow Microsoft's guidelines here, sharing and managing permissions at the highest level, working your way down, best to do it at the group level or the site level. Again, though, this is not easy, right? Try to avoid breaking inheritance wherever possible. Again, caveat being when you're sharing links, sometimes this is happening without your direct knowledge. Limit sharing link options and disable the anyone link, as we've talked about, at least at a tenant level. It should be disabled and only enabled on a per case basis, right? One of my favorite ones that I don't know how many people know about is this one, that you can actually set that only people with existing access be the default link when people click copy link. But it is something that you have to run via PowerShell. And I have a link to one of our friends' blogs here, Mark Anderson. Michael blogged about this. And there's actually, it used to be you'd have to actually recursively go site by site, but there's now a command you can do this for the entire tenant that Mark talks about in this blog. Expiration is a great idea. For anyone links, please, if you're using them, put expiration dates on them, because at the very least, you're not going to remember to come back and turn it off. It will auto expire. Make sure those links are defaulting to view and not edit. Definitely use sensitivity labels. Another one I really like are these two ones Michael and I often talk about as easy ones to miss. The second from the bottom one is you can set that only owners of a site can share the entire site, but only then the members are only allowed to share individual files and folders.
This is a really good one. Yeah, it's again, it's not a default option, which is painful, but it is an option that's available there. Yeah, the other one is my favorite, and I don't know if people know this, that you can disallow guests from sharing items they don't own. It's really interesting, right? So again, by default, if you have a guest and a guest has access to a SharePoint site, and that SharePoint site has, let's say, the ability to share anyone links, that guest can go in and start cranking through and creating as many anyone links that you have. It's right. Bizarre. There is an option. I don't know if people know this. There is an option to actually disable this.
Yes.
For some reason, by default, it's not enabled. Yeah,
right.
it's very strange. Very strange.
Interesting.
So we got that as well. But I mean, Dave, let's be honest. Luckily, this problem has been around for 20 years, right? Microsoft has made huge gains in how to manage permissions in the last 20 years. So let's have a look at that
Let's look at them side by side here. We
comparison.
have, oh, interesting. So I managed to dig up a screenshot from SharePoint 2007, and then grabbed a screenshot last night from SharePoint Online 2025. How many years later here? 18 years?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. This has been a problem from the very beginning. There's literally been hardly anything done at all in the last 20 years. Probably because Microsoft's been spending, nuclear generators worth of energy for Copilot. It's exactly the same. So folks, don't expect this nightmare to change anytime soon either. I just think there's so much complexity into this and just a fundamental piece that, again, it's not going to be changing anytime soon. But there literally hasn't been much done
Right.
at all. I think if you even had a screenshot of SharePoint 2003 here, Dave, or WSS 3.0, I think it's pretty much the same as it was
It's
then.
getting hard to find these screenshots now, I found, unfortunately. It's too bad, but
You can just generate fake ones with Copilot, like people generating fake invoices and receipts and stuff.
I don't think we'll talk about this in depth, but we do hear there is an announcement, right, from Microsoft around a new what they call a hero link, which is coming.
Yeah, this is new. This was announced in build because of the sharing links craziness essentially that was happening, where you've got a different sharing link for different things, and you can have one document with like 50 different sharing links on it. There is a new concept they're going to introduce called a hero link, which is essentially one link, and that link essentially is the same, and depending on who has access to it, it's going to work a little bit differently. I think this is a really great thing. It just means you're not going to have 20 sharing links for a single document, for example. It would be one sharing link, and then again, you've got a whole bunch of things that you can actually edit and do. I haven't seen this in action, but from what I've seen, in terms of like what Microsoft presented, super useful as well through here. Okay, let's keep going here, Dave, because we're almost out of time.
Yeah, let's talk about, Michael, let's talk about some of the out-of-the-box tools here.
Yeah, let's go through this really quickly, and then we'll give you a sneak peek of what we're working on in Orchestry, and if you're interested there. Okay, so SharePoint's permissions reporting, I mean, it's not great, folks. Let's be honest with you. If you want to know who has access to what, you're clicking around, you're going back into the back end here. You can view things at the group level, as Dave mentioned, then you go into the permissions level. It's not particularly great, right? You really have to have a good understanding of what's going on. You're constantly clicking through. And I know, Dave, we didn't even talk about things like permission levels, right? Because this would be instead of a 60-minute webinar, it'd be a 60-day webinar. Yeah. And you're trying to understand different permission levels and how they interact, and whether permissions are granted through a SharePoint group with an Entra ID group or directly. There's a lot that we didn't cover. Right. But just trying to understand who has access to what, really difficult. It's one of the reasons that so many customers have such challenges, and you probably have challenges. It's also one of the reasons people are resorting to things like PowerShell scripts or third-party tools, for instance. The next option around sharing links here, I'll let you click through. Okay, so there's a sharing links report that you can generate. And from what we have seen with customers, this is kind of the recommended approach, Dave, that we hear, right, from Microsoft. Like, hey, you've got a bunch of sharing links. That's great. We have a report for you. Go and generate this report, send it over to your owners, and then they can go through and remove all of these sharing links. It just doesn't happen. But essentially what this allows you to do, you can go into a SharePoint site, you can generate a list of all of your sharing links like you have here, and then you can go in and individually go through the items and start removing these things. It's something that no one really does at all, ever. And it's one of the reasons that it's become so problematic as well through here. There is a capability in SharePoint Advanced Management, or SharePoint Premium, or whatever it's called now. I think it's SAM, that gives you the ability to create, what are they called? Those site activity reports that allow you to do that as well. There's also in SharePoint Advanced Management a bunch of data access governance reports, which are really good, but they're quite limited. And I don't think people know this, Dave, because a lot of people don't actually, Microsoft doesn't say this. So There's
Yeah.
great reports there around anyone links, for instance, but it's not the creation of like what you ideally want to see is show me all of the anyone links
Right.
whenever they were created. Just how many do we have?
Right.
These reports don't do that. It's more trends around how many were created in the last typically 28 days. So you have to be careful of that because we've had a lot of the customers come to us say, hey, we've gone through the SAM reports, we've cleaned out all of these sharing links, but I've still got hundreds more. It's like, well, it's only the ones created in the last 28 days. And as Greg mentioned, these SharePoint Advanced Management, you need to have at least one Copilot license. That is true. Just buy one Copilot license simply to get SharePoint Advanced Management. I don't know why Microsoft gets you to buy one. It doesn't make any sense to me. Well, I do know why. So Microsoft can say that every tenant on Earth uses Copilot. But the biggest tip for the day is if you want access to these reports, just buy one Copilot license. That's all you need, and you get access to them as well as access to Copilot. But there's a bunch of these things. The one that I like, which is interesting, which is in private preview, is called the permission state report. That's the one which a lot of people have been asking for, Dave. Show me everywhere where this person has access to. It's going to give you a report of that. Unfortunately, it's not going to, it's actually not going to tell you, though, the items. It's just going to say this person has access to 37 things within the site, and you have to go in and again, go down into that, down into that deeper level.
Yeah.
The last one here is around PowerShell, Dave, if you want to move forward. PowerShell as well. There's a ton of PowerShell scripts out there for people. I've tried to go and look at a few of them. There's a couple here. There's links here which I find are pretty good. Here also, again, so lots of good stuff essentially here. Again, with PowerShell, it's good, but you start running into challenges, particularly if you've got a lot of sites and there's a ton of content there, right? Because again, you have to have some experience in terms of what's going on. And then also it can be difficult because typically it's just a PowerShell script, so you're trying to understand what's going on. Adrian, no, you don't have to assign it to anyone. You just need to have it within your tenant. But as Dave's chatting here, you might as well. Okay, how can we help, David?
So we've got some features here, and if you're interested to see more, we'd love to hear from you. We'll have a poll at the end here, but I think we've tried to build a product around filling these gaps, right? So on sharing links, the big one here is you want to see the full history. You don't want to see 28 days worth of sharing links. You want to see all of the sharing links that exist currently, giving people access to content. And this is technically quite difficult to do because the scale of this can be enormous. But this is critical, right? We've had customers, Michael, that have told us, even sometimes, like you said with Sam, they said, oh, we've run all the reports. We have 0 anonymous links. Orchestry is telling me I have 7 million of them. What's going on? Orchestry must be wrong. It's just, again, it's a time scale issue. 28 days is nothing, right? In the scale of things, you could have been in online for 10 years and amass tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of sharing links and have no real effective way to see them. Our sharing links reporting scans site by site by site recursively, shows you all the items that have links, the kind of links they have, who they're shared with, who created them, and soon we'll even have these insights telling you some important things you should know about related to that link. Most importantly, though, in my opinion, we give you the ability to action them in bulk at scale, right? So you can perform very structured filters and say, for example, find me all the links that Michael created in this site because he created a whole bunch and they're bad news. Filter to all of those very quickly, 2 clicks, confirm, delete, and then they're all gone, right? And you have confidence now about what is in there from a sharing links perspective. So that's a big deal. We also give you a lot of detail around the links, right? So we'll go down to the level of for every single link. Look at all the detail that we can provide you with that. So who it's been, who it's been given access to. Are they groups? Are they users? Who last accessed it even is really, really interesting to see. We can start to track that over time. So that's really, really powerful. But one of the things that we heard from many customers in the early access was, where should I even begin with this? I have so many links, where should I start? And that's why we launched Smart Actions within this, and it's going to be coming out in other features as well, which is a one-click resolution that you can perform at scale across your workspaces, where we can say, here, look, you've got this many anonymous links, this many organizational links, a bunch of old links, and a bunch of links that have never, ever been used by anyone. That's the low-hanging fruit, right? That's the area where if you don't know where to begin, this, at least 3 out of 4 of these for sure, the anonymous, the old, and the never used, are good places to start with that initial cleanup, right? And we can help you do that with a single click, make this really simple. And as with everything else in Orchestry, we will log that and make sure it's trackable historically. Another thing we recently launched is our Copilot dashboard, and this brings together a kind of a lot of the information that we have now at the site level up to kind of more of a tenant level. And we have full counts for you. So how many total instances of broken inheritance do you have across your entire tenant? How many total anyone links do you have across your entire tenant? Again, this is the really interesting, eye-opening one where customers say, trust me, Michael, trust me, David, we have 0 anonymous links. We light up this dashboard and we see a very different story here.
Yeah, just a couple of questions here. Greg, will broken inheritance be run in the health check reports that get run? Not at the moment, but it will be in here. We'll probably put them in eventually here, Greg, but not at the moment for the health check thing. And then, do you have a timeline for the permissions dashboard from Stephen? I would say Q4, and Dave will probably show a little bit why. But the goal here is to give, right, Dave, more of a comprehensive overview of the craziness that's going on within your tenant in the permissions dashboard. You can kind of see what we're doing, what we're starting with on the Copilot dashboard side, though. So you start to see things like this, and all of these are clickable as well, Dave, right? Like you can click into here and see all of the sharing links as well through here.
All of these lead to reports, so you can drill down. Yeah. We also have reporting on broken inheritance. So that's that secondary layer that I described that is often the culprit for problems. Very difficult to report on. You can't get a report like this in SharePoint. There's nothing like this. This is showing you the same view, but from the broken inheritance angle, right? How many instances of broken inheritance do you have, on what files, on what objects, and who are they shared with? We also use this information to aggregate up to a risk rating in Orchestry, which is a new thing we've released, which considers and takes into account many of these issues that we've described here. What we're going to be moving towards with the permissions and sharing is ultimately stitching this together into a single cohesive picture. And I think one of the things that we're going to be moving towards is giving you all this information in a single view, allowing you to make more effective decisions, right? And I think much of this is rolling out or has rolled out. Some customers have gotten the sharing links functionality, but it is going out in waves right now. So if you're a current customer and you're not seeing it,
you will. Yeah, you will. Yeah,
this
is rolling out very, very soon here. Hang on, Dave, a couple of questions here. One sec. Ian, 1200 classic sites, horrendous broken inheritance. Yep. Can the Orchestry Copilot dashboard read this data? Do we show classic sites on the Copilot dashboard?
Not yet, but we're going to start crawling classic sites, channel sites, and non-group connected team sites in the coming weeks. And then once we have that data available, we'll look at whether we can turn on the same kind of sharing links crawling for those sites.
So Ian, to answer your question, we are, as Dave said, classic sites, non-group connected team sites, all of the other craziness that you have, all of that is going to become part of the Orchestry experience. You'll see it through the dashboard. You'll be able to assign policies to them. And you will also see all of the sharing links on them as well, Ian. And that's, I would say, next month, right? Where we've got a bunch of beta customers using that as well. Awesome. This is can I talk about this, because I really like this. Well, we've only got a minute left. All right.
Why don't you talk about it and I'll initiate the last poll here.
Yes. Oh yeah, you initiate the poll. So one of the things that we are doing as well was we heard from our beta customers that IT admins don't want to go and blast all of these links away, essentially. So can we get the owners or the users to do it? Sharing links review is going to come as part of the workspace review functionality as well. But instead of giving your users a table of 50,000 sharing links, Orchestry is going to have the smart actions concept where we're going to say, hey, here's the links that we recommend that you should delete. You can configure that as part of the policy. And then an end user can actually say, yep, I don't need these. Make it as part of the review and delete them as well through here. Perfect. We're almost out of time. Bethany, I got it yesterday. Yeah, you're right, Bethany. Yep, some of this stuff is already out, and a lot of the stuff it's coming. For those of you who are Orchestry customers at the moment, we're changing the way that we deliver stuff. There's just going to be stuff coming in kind of smaller chunks. Last thing to talk about before we jump out of here is this: the ability, Dave. I know you like this one. The ability to see sharing links as part of the team information tab for owners. This will be awesome, because imagine if you're a team owner now, you can see the sharing links and you can go and delete them without having to do a workspace review or anything like that as well. And that's in this sprint, probably a month out, but we have that in code working already.
I think even sooner. I think within a couple of weeks, people will start to see this. So you can, again, expose the full sharing links to your team owners and get some help with managing them.
Which is great, basically, through here as well. So a lot of this stuff is, some of this stuff is out, some of this stuff is coming as well through here.
All right, that's it. We flew through time, but it was a great session.
Thank you, everyone. Listen, really appreciate all of the comments, the questions, and everything else. Let us know if you folks are interested in doing more of a deeper dive. If you are interested in seeing this Orchestry in action, just let us know. We didn't want to make a sales pitch about this, because I hate when vendors do that, but there's a ton of really amazing stuff coming for the permissions management. That's the thing we want to do, right, Dave? Orchestry, managing permissions and helping you do all of that stuff. And I think we're going to try to do it in a really powerful, interesting way. But thank you so much. If you did answer yes to the poll, someone from Orchestry will get in touch with you to set up a session. But join us for our next webinar. I don't know what it's going to be about, but it's going to be useful. And again, really appreciate your time. You will get the recording. We'll send the slides. We'll see you next time.
Thanks everyone.